July comment, I touch on the presidential address by President Jacob Zuma, the State of the Nation address. And there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, I think that there were some very positive elements coming out of it, but the most important one, of course, is that he touches on one of those key commodities of the modern industry, and I've spoken about this before. We argue that the commodities of modern industry are information and energy, and that in fact Electricity and Control magazine looks specifically at those two commodities. But for the President to put energy at the center of the State of the Nation address, I think, was a very, very important statement. What we need to appreciate is that there are many options available to us for energy. We know full well, and there's no debate about this, that the fact that we haven't been able to provide energy adequately to our industry has in fact slowed down the development of that industry. Again, as I've said previously, this is a matter which we can address with hindsight, but it is a matter which we'd never like to see repeat itself. We need to consider a couple of, I think, very novel options. The first one to understand is that once upon a time there was a debate in the country about the possibility of a number of time zones. Now, that actually has merit, because if you look at the challenge facing our national utility, Eskom, the real challenge is addressing the peak load in the evenings. Not so much the base load, which to a large extent, if that's nice and static and controlled, we can deal with. But you get these incredibly nasty peaks. And those peaks are associated with people at home, like me and you. And that's a challenge. If we can shift those peaks somehow, there may be some merit in that. But having said that we face a challenge, what I don't want any of us ever to forget is that we must not forget where we've come from. We came from a situation where the vast majority of South Africans had precisely no access to electrical energy whatsoever. I remember very clearly in the early 1990s, in those days, going to visit Orange Farm, where an electrification program had just commenced. I was absolutely blown away by the evidence of entrepreneurial activity based around the supply of electrical energy. The fact that people could run fridges for other people and keep their food cool. The fact that people could charge batteries. The fact that people could start businesses around the supply of energy. Frankly, that convinced me that this was not something that we should consider, but it was absolutely mandatory. So we must recognize that without question, the quality of life for a huge number of South Africans has been impacted on massively and positively by the supply of electrical energy. The challenge we face is how do we deal with that? And in fact, if you think about it, it's not so much an energy challenge, is it? It's a power challenge. It's a matter of getting the energy when you need it. And that's one of our challenges. And incidentally, we mustn't forget or lose sight of the fact that if we concentrate only on alternative forms of energy, solar and wind, for instance, we must understand that those in essence are to some extent also supply of energy, not necessarily at the time when it's most needed. So this poses a challenge. Equally, incorporating these standalone supply sources onto the national grid as it is currently configured also poses a challenge. But my sense is that this is a challenge that we are in fact rising to.